Welcome in to another episode of the Barnes on Bama podcast. I'm your host, Owen Barnes, and we have some games to discuss. We have an NCAA tournament bracket, so I'm going to discuss a few things. First things first, I'm going to talk about the SEC tournament. I was in attendance for Alabama's game on Saturday. I was not in attendance for the game on Friday. I was actually watching it in a bar with a bunch of Kentucky fans. So was really happy about what I saw on Friday. Obviously, a little bit more disappointed by what I saw on Saturday. We'll talk a little bit about the SEC basketball tournament, about both games that Alabama played. And then we will talk about the NCAA March Madness bracket that has come out. Obviously, this is going to be related to Alabama's draw. Spoiler alert, I think Alabama got a pretty decent draw. And we'll talk about that. I'm going to preview a little bit about what you need to know for Robert Morris as well as St. Mary's, just in case we play them. Obviously, with Vanderbilt, we've already played them, so it is a little bit different. I think how Alabama has already played, if you want to have an idea as to what I think about Vanderbilt, go back, watch that episode. But like I said, I will talk about Robert Morris, we'll talk about St. Mary's, and then we will get out of here. So as I mentioned, I'm going to talk about Alabama's run in the SEC basketball tournament. First things first, Alabama started out with Kentucky. The game against Kentucky went about as well as you could have asked for. Honestly, this was the game that I expected. This was the game that we talked about with Lamont Butler being out. This was the game that happened in Coleman Coliseum, honestly, just to a much more extreme extent. The game in Coleman Coliseum, Alabama ends up winning pretty handily, and in this Kentucky game, Alabama does even better. And the crazy part is when you think about how well Alabama played in this game, and Alabama wins by almost 30, Mark Sears honestly did not play well. Unfortunately, that was something that happened in both games in the SEC tournament. He was playing really well in the 4 to 5 games leading up to the tournament. He did not have his best showing from a shooting performance during the SEC tournament. However, it didn't matter, right? Alabama scores 99 with Mark Sears going 1 of 8 from 3. Aiden Holloway shot well. Jaron Stevenson shot well. Grant shot well. Philon looked awesome. Right, Alabama really was just kind of controlling what you would expect. It felt like even though Mark Sears was not doing well from a shooting perspective, he was really good on the defensive end. I thought Philon was incredible on the defensive end. Overall, it was just Alabama's, it was showing Alabama's style of play to its best extent, right? Alabama's defense looked as good as it had looked all year. And Alabama just, to their credit, took over the game and controlled Kentucky. This is this reason why you knew Alabama has that ceiling, right? That is what you see when you look at this Alabama team against a team like Kentucky. We knew that Kentucky, without Lamont Butler, without Jackson Robinson, it was going to be a really, really tough day for them. And that's exactly what happened, right? It was a super tough day for them. It was a situation where Alabama was able to kind of do whatever they wanted from an offensive perspective. They were able to dribble drive, get that penetration, get the kick out. Jaron Stevenson hits his open threes. Like I said, we had plenty of guys hitting open threes. Mo D hits an open three. The Kentucky fans next to me were like, that guy hasn't shot a three all year, right? Like looking at his form. It was just a full situation where Alabama was clicking on all cylinders, and it looked exactly how you wanted it to look. It was perfect from a standpoint of Alabama getting off to a hot start in the SEC tournament. So when you see that game, you're like, okay, awesome. They're playing well after the Auburn game. This is what you want to see. And then we move into Saturday. So all 4 top seeds advance, sets up Tennessee versus Auburn, Alabama versus Florida. As I said, with Kentucky ended up losing, the tickets dropped in price pretty substantially. Me and my girlfriend were able to attend. So we did attend both of these games. And Alabama and Auburn, unfortunately, both lost. This is a situation where Florida comes out, and Alabama, similar to game 1, right? In the first half, Alabama played great. It really felt like Alabama was honestly in a bit of control. It felt like Florida was, anytime we were playing good defense, they were counterpunching. But it really felt like, hey, if Alabama can make just a few small adjustments, Alabama has a very good chance of winning this game. Unfortunately, one really big thing happened in the end of that first half, and it didn't seem to be a major thing because it wasn't a stoppage of play, but all of a sudden we start hearing rumblings. Grant Nelson is questionable to return. And then he doesn't come out for warmups. And then you get word, hey, looks like he's doubtful to return. He's in a shooting shirt and just shorts on the sideline. And you learn in the post game that he has a little bit of a knee issue, and he's going to go see Dr. Kane on Monday. I'm recording this on Monday. I have not seen any news officially come out about what is going on with his knee. However, I will say, unofficially, sources, rumors, whatever, it sounds like it's okay. It sounds like it's going to be a smaller thing. If we're without him, it's going to be for the first game. And spoiler alert, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. If we do, have some issue with him not being able to play the second game, I honestly don't think it would be the largest issue either. Obviously, would love to have him back for the second game, but I think Alabama could survive both games without him. But obviously, when you get to the NCAA tournament, you want to be at full strength. You want to have everybody clicking on all cylinders, playing together. It just gives you the best chance for success when you're talking about the NCAA tournament. So obviously I would like to see him at least play in the second game. But the first game, if he doesn't end up playing, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world for Alabama. I do like our chances without him. So, that happens in that game, and credit to Florida, right? It was not all about Grant Nelson's injury. I'm not going to say that it is. However, I feel like with Grant Nelson's injury, your odds from coming and winning this game went from 5% to 0%. Florida was clicking on all cylinders. Even the decent defense Alabama was giving, whether it be Mark Sears or whoever, Walter Clayton and some of these other guards were just hitting really tough shots. Credit to Florida, right? That's what they do. Again, they were able to impose their physicality on Alabama. But again, that's partially where Grant Nelson comes into play. When you have a 6'11 guy that's super physical and was playing as well as he was playing in the game, it hurts you when you lose him, right? Grant Nelson plays just 10 minutes and he has 3 rebounds. Cliff Amora, he played 16 and only had 1, right? So Grant was giving you something that even your starting center wasn't. It just is a situation where, credit to Florida, right? They're the hottest team in the country right now. They're going to be a favorite for a lot of people for the March Madness. They have been playing awesome. Because of this, Florida gets the number 1 seed, and we'll talk about the bracket here in a few minutes. But credit to Florida. As much as this was also about Grant Nelson's injury, and I do think that it played a major factor, I think that Florida was probably winning this game no matter what. I think Florida showed us what we saw in Coleman Coliseum. I think it was a situation where Florida, was just giving a lot of issues around the rim. Their size was causing a lot of problems for us around the rim. Shots that typically are going in were not going in. Florida was getting run out dunks. Florida was hitting shots that, even open turnarounds or whatever, right? It was just situations and shots that you don't want somebody to hit, right? The shots that Alabama's trying to get somebody to take. And unfortunately, Florida was hitting them. Right? Credit to Florida, right? Don't want to take away from them in saying this. But I do think this is a situation where, it's not the end of the world for Alabama. Honestly, after the Grant Nelson injury, it felt like, hey, it may not be the worst thing to not win this thing, to get an extra day of rest, to get some people some time. Let's not go into the tournament with another injury. We got our win in the SEC tournament. Obviously, it would be great to win it, but it's okay. Just rest everybody. You will be okay. You feel much differently about this loss going into the SEC tournament than you did last season's loss to Florida going into the NCAA tournament, especially with how the end of the season worked out, right? Alabama had one of the toughest schedules in all of college basketball. Probably, I would have to look, but I could almost guarantee the toughest schedule in college basketball over the last 8-9 games. And Alabama played well in those, beating Auburn on the road, obviously dominating Kentucky in that first round matchup. So I do not think all is lost just because you lost this game. So credit to Alabama, credit to Florida. I thought that Florida, deserved to win the SEC basketball tournament. I saw, the team that I saw play against Alabama, I felt confident was going to beat Tennessee. They were able to. Credit to Florida, they win they win the SEC basketball tournament, and they get the number 1 seed for March Madness, whereas Alabama and Tennessee both are a 2 seed because of that. Now, debate with what you will. I do think there are some circumstances in where I think Alabama got a slightly more favorable draw than Florida, even though Florida is the 1 seed and Alabama is the 2 seed. They're in different brackets, and I think that the way the Alabama side of the bracket shapes out for like a Sweet 16 Elite 8 style run at least shapes out very favorably, especially with play styles, right? Because all the NCAA tournament is a play styles tournament, right? When you look at the NCAA tournament, we can shift there now. When you talk about March Madness and you talk about the NCAA tournament, every team that got here has won some games, right? And when you're playing a lower seeded team, in a lot of cases, these teams have won their conference tournament, right? So these teams have won their conference tournaments, and then your other teams are teams that have a variety of different play styles that get the at-large bids. And based on how the committee ranks these teams, it can be a very different game, right? So we look to last season, Alabama plays a College of Charleston team that was a very fast-paced, up-tempo team. Then you play a Grand Canyon that was super grinded out, super physical. Those were two very different teams, right? The first game, I don't think we hardly saw Mohamed Diabate at all in that game. The second game, Mohamed Diabate had to have some of the biggest roles or else we were going to lose the game, right? It was a situation where you went from a game that was not super physical that you had to have to a game that you had to have every rebound because it may cost you the game. That's how the tournament works, even against a smaller team, whether it be an upset, whether it be a regular, the favorite makes it. No matter what it is, it's a styles make fights tournament, right? So when you look at these teams, you have to look at the play style in which they play, right? So first things first, you have Robert Morris. Robert Morris is a middle of the road team. They don't play super fast. They don't play super slow. They're 140th in the country out of 360 teams. So slightly faster than slow, but very central in this. They're actually a little faster on defense, a little slower on offense, which is a little odd. So they are used to playing a little faster, but I'm sure they have not seen a team to Alabama's pace this season. Very important to note, Nate Oates, has played Robert Morris on 2 occasions before. When he was at Buffalo, he lost the first matchup by 3. He won the second matchup by 15. So this is a situation where he does have some familiarity with this team and this coach, right? So it was the same coach when Nate played them back at his time in Buffalo. So this is a situation where this team won their conference tournament. They had the 6th longest active win streak. They have a 10-game winning streak coming into March Madness. But again, if you're playing against a team that is in March Madness, they had to have won their conference tournament. So at a minimum, especially when you're talking about a smaller team, 2, 3, 4 game winning streak at a minimum because they had to win their conference tournament to get here. But Robert Morris has not lost since February 2nd, and before that, they had not lost since January the 8th. However, by far, Alabama will be easily the toughest test they've had all season, right? That's to be expected. The toughest game they had this season, other than that, was they played West Virginia on the opening night of college basketball on that Monday, March 4th. They lost that game by 28 points. So this is a team that lost pretty handily to the only Power 5 team they have played this season. When you look at their KenPom page, they do a decent job at running teams off the 3-point line. They do a pretty good job at getting assists themselves. They turn over the ball a little bit. They're an okay rebounding team, but when you consider them as an okay rebounding team, that's against the teams they've faced, right? They've not faced a ton of great teams. They are a pretty short team. When you consider an average height, they are under the average for all the teams in the country. Alabama is, of course, one of the tallest teams in the country, which is why I said even if Grant Nelson doesn't play, we could slot in a Jaron Stevenson, a Mohamed Diabate, an Aiden Sherrill in that slot, and I think they would be more than fine. I don't think that we have to have Grant Nelson to be successful in this game, right? This is not going to be a situation where you have to have every big, fully ready, fully healthy to be able to win this game. They do have a couple of shooters. They've got two guys that are averaging over 40% from three. They've got two other guys shooting 38% from three. They are a team that's going to like to shoot some of them. Obviously, Alabama shoots much more than they do, but they do take a decent number of threes. They also have a guy in Cam Woods that is a self-admitted Alabama fan from Pinson Valley, played with Jalen, played with some of the guys. I want to say Jalen Ibakwe. I may be wrong on that, but played with some of the guys over at Pinson Valley. Won a state title game in Alabama. Was on NC State's Final Four team last season and talked with some of our reporters about how he was a huge fan of Alabama, watched all of our games. So this is, going to be the hometown kid being able to play against his team that he cheered on his whole life. So that is going to be an interesting note when you look at this game. Simply put, I think Alabama just outmatches them, right? We've not seen Alabama play a team in this level of KenPom, and for reference, they are 147th in KenPom. If we look at Alabama's teams they have faced, the last time they faced a team in the 130s, right? That's the closest reference we have, was South Dakota State and Kent State back in December. They won those games by 23 and 27 points, right? So just to give you a reference for where Alabama was at that moment, Alabama was beating teams of this ilk by around 25 points. Obviously, this team is going to have a lot to play for. They're coming on a hot streak, all those things that we've mentioned. So we absolutely can't take them not seriously. But I do think that if Alabama plays even to its kind of potential, Alabama wins this game very easily. I think that it would take a horrific game for Alabama to lose this game. Just going to be honest, I think that the style in which Alabama plays is going to give a team like this a lot of trouble. Then, when you move over to the St. Mary's Vanderbilt game, right? I think that Vanderbilt has a very good shot in that game. St. Mary's obviously the higher ranked team, so I do want to break down them as well, just because Alabama has not seen them this year, or really in recent memory. And so I want to talk about that. St. Mary's was actually the team that Alabama was supposed to play last season as the 5 seed. However, Grand Canyon knocked them off. So if St. Mary's can win their game this time, they will get their crack at Alabama. If not, Alabama plays Vanderbilt, a team in which we had a lot of success this season against. However, St. Mary's is a team that, if you are not aware, is coached by Randy Bennett, a legendary coach. He's been there many, many years, and is one of the slowest teams in the entire country. St. Mary's is a grinded-out defensive team. So when you think about a grinded-out defensive team compared to a team like Alabama, obviously it becomes that styles make fights we talked about. It becomes a situation of, do we think that Alabama will be able to do you think that Alabama is going to be able to exert its tempo? And how I look at tempo is I use KenPom from an analytics perspective when I talk about tempo, and I talk about number of possessions. And I generally look at what are some of the teams that Alabama has played that like to slow it down, and how is Alabama able to exert or not exert its pace on that team. And these are elite teams, right? The teams that are the slowest that Alabama has played are teams like Purdue. On the road, Purdue actually held Alabama to 68 possessions early in the season. Then you have a team like Houston. They held Alabama to lower possessions because it was 76, but it was in overtime. But then you have teams like Tennessee and Mississippi State and Texas A&M. All of those games, Alabama got over 70 possessions, and in the situation of Texas A&M, it was 79 possessions. We got to 77 against Mississippi State, 75 against Tennessee. Alabama was able to speed up a lot of teams that even are defensive and grinded out style teams, right? Those are some teams that when you think of teams in the SEC that like to grind it out, or just a really defensive, hard-nosed, physical team, those are those teams, and Alabama was able to speed every single one of them up. The last time Alabama had a game in sub 70 possessions was that Purdue game, right? So it's really tough for me to say, hey, Alabama is a team that's tempo can have a problem because, like, for example, if I look to last season's team got held to 64 possessions against South Carolina, 66 against Liberty, 68 against Missouri. They ended up getting held to 63 against UConn in the championship game, right? They had some games later in the season in SEC play in which teams were able to grind them out. Whereas South Carolina held us to under 60-something possessions last season, we get them to 74 this season, right? So Alabama has just done a much better job this season at keeping that tempo up. A lot of that has to do with LeBaron Philon and Aiden Holloway and having guys other than Mark Sears that can run the point and get going quickly. So it's just a way that our offense has run this season, but it is something to look at when you're looking at a team like St. Mary's that likes to grind you out. The reason I mention this is St. Mary's is a team that only plays about 6 or 7 guys. So when you're talking about tempo, number of possessions, how fast we play, that's something that definitely can wear on a team that has a lower depth amount. It also is a situation where when you're a team that is so methodical on offense and so slow on offense, at over 20 seconds per possession, it's a situation where if Alabama gets out to any level of a lead, it's going to be really, really difficult for St. Mary's to come back in that game, right? And as we know, Alabama is a team that can put points on you in a hurry. Now, St. Mary's has a little bit of an equalizer. They're 6th in the country at running people off the three-point line. They do play in a very weak conference. They have played some decent teams. They beat Gonzaga twice this season. They did lose to them in their conference tournament. They did also beat USC and Utah as well as Nebraska. They lost to Arizona State, Boise State, Utah State, and San Francisco, right? So they did have some losses. None of their losses by double digits. Their biggest loss this season was actually by 7 points, right? So this is a team that has done a very good job of grinding teams out. The most points they've given up this season is in the low 70s. Yes, in the low 70s. It's actually 75 against Utah State. So this is a team that does not give up a ton of points. Again, they just have not played a team like Alabama. The fans of St. Mary's are going to point to Gonzaga as, hey, Gonzaga is a team that plays fairly quick and as a team that has a good offense. I would agree with that. Gonzaga is an adjusted tempo of 70.2. However, Alabama is an adjusted tempo of 74.9, right? Just a completely different paced team. Alabama does a great job speeding teams up and has done an incredible job this season of it. And they are on another level when you're talking about tempo. So in my mind, we are going to be able to speed up St. Mary's. And also at a bare minimum, I think Alabama is going to give St. Mary's some issues, especially inside the arc, right? St. Mary's is a decent 2-point defense team. However, as we know, Alabama is an elite 2-point offense team. St. Mary's does have a couple of bigger guys. They've got a 6'10", a 7'1" guy that plays some significant minutes. They do have some bigger players. However, again, I just think that Alabama is a team that St. Mary's has not played this season, and it would be a problem. Do I think that Randy Bennett coaches an incredible offense and a really good team? Absolutely. I think that St. Mary's is a good team and would give Alabama very much a challenge. However, I do believe in Alabama in that game. I do believe that Alabama would be able to have success in that game, and I think that Alabama would win that game. I don't want to say fairly handily, but I think that Alabama wins comfortably in that game, which would then set up a matchup with either BYU, VCU, Wisconsin, or Montana if Alabama was to win those first two, right? So we're just going to talk about those first 2 games today. Obviously, if Alabama wins those games, I will then break down the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 matchups and what Alabama may be facing. Alabama is paired with Duke in this bracket, so if we have a collision course with the number 1 seed in our bracket, it's going to be with Duke in Newark, New Jersey. That's going to be happening in that Elite 8 game. So that is the game that a lot of people have circled that they think is going to happen based on both teams' path to the Final Four. It kind of feels like a collision course for number 1 and number 2 is fairly likely in this one. But, obviously we have to play the games. Alabama has has to be successful. Alabama needs to be healthy, and Alabama needs to play to their potential if they're going to try to make another Final Four run. Nate Oates was asked about expectations for this team, and he said Final Four or bust. He goes, I want to get to the, I consider it a disappointment if we don't get to the Final Four, and my expectations are to win games in the Final Four, not just make it there, right? So that is what the expectations are of the head coach, and that is what he is portraying to the team. He wants this to be a player-led team. He has 4 fifth-year seniors, and he has, telling them, hey, your next loss is your last loss. It is your last game that you will have in college basketball at the University of Alabama, playing college basketball at all. So what do you want to do with your team? Make it what you want to make it. The reason we brought you guys in was for this run right now. So, we need to be the toughest, hardest team playing out there. We cannot get out rebounded. We cannot get outplayed. We cannot get out physical. This is it, right? If you want to win it, let's prove it. So that is what we have to say when we're looking at this. I think that Alabama absolutely is capable of making another Final Four run. Obviously, if we do get set up with a game against Duke, that's going to be a very tough matchup. But both teams have to get there. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take it game by game. These are kind of my general breakdowns. I am going to obviously have threads. I will do full player threads for Robert Morris for whoever our second round matchup is if we're able to get through Robert Morris. And then I will continue doing those pregame threads as well as predictions for every single game. So if you are interested in seeing those, please follow me over on Twitter. That's where I'm going to put those out. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I do appreciate all the support. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and I will see you in the next episode. Peace.